Welcome to Gemara Academy. In this class, we will learn the Gemara Masechta Shabbos on Daf Zayin Amud Beis and Daf Ches Amud Aleph. Let's begin. In the Gemara up till now, first we spoke about many different parts of the Mishnah. Then we moved on and presented a Brisa that spoke about the four Rishuyos of Shabbos: a Rosh Hashanah, a Rosh Hashanah, a Carmelis, and a Mokem Torah. First, the Gemara discussed the part of the Brisa that spoke about a Rosh Hashanah and a Rosh Hashanah. Then the Gemara discussed the next part of the Brisa that spoke about a Carmelis. The Gemara then continued and presented some cases of a Carmelis, as well as the parameters for a Carmelis. That was the previous piece of Gemara. In that piece of Gemara, we mentioned the teaching from Rav Gidl and the teaching from Rav Chisda. And in this Gemara, we're going to speak about those two teachings of Rav Gidl and Rav Chisda. So let's see the Gemara now inside. Gufa, the teaching itself. Amar Rav Gidl, Amar Rav Chia bar Yosef, Amar Rav. Rav Gidl, Amar Rav Chia bar Yosef, Amar Rav said, a house that's inside isn't 10 tefachim high. And its roof completes it to 10 tefachim high. The din is as follows. On its roof, it's permitted to carry in the whole thing, since it has the height of 10 tefachim, and it's also 4x4. It's therefore Rosh Hashanah. Inside it, one can only carry within 4 amos, since it doesn't have the height of a Rosh Hashanah. It's not considered a Rosh Hashanah. So that's the teaching, and now we have the comment that the Gemara is presenting about this teaching, which is a scenario where the din could be changed. Amar Abaya, and it's an arrow pointing upwards, a purple arrow, because it's just an explanation regarding this case or an exception to this case. It's about the case. Amar Abaya, Abaya said, Vim chokak by dalad al dalad, and if he carved in it an area that's 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim wide, v'hishlime liyud, and completed it to 10 tefachim, so he dug into the ground, made an area that's 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim wide, and it completes it. So, for example, the house was 9 tefachim high, and he dug an area that's 1 tefach deep by 4 by 4. Says Abai, the din is muter l'tatal b'kulei. It's permitted to carry in the whole thing. So what needs to be explained now is we could understand why in that area a person could carry in the whole thing. Now it's not dalat amas, so it doesn't really matter, but we could see why that area is a Rosh Hashanah. But why is the rest of the house viewed as a Rosh Hashanah? The rest of the house doesn't have the height of 10 tefachim. So Abai explains, my time, what's the reason? It's chayri Rosh Hashanah. It's holes in the Rosh Hashanah, and the din is v'chayri Rosh Hashanah k'Rosh Hashanah damu, and holes in the Rosh Hashanah are like a Rosh Hashanah. So the way we view the house is that that area that's dug out is a Rosh Hashanah because it has the dimensions of 4 by 4 wide and 10 tefachim high, and the rest of the house is looked at as chayri Rosh Hashanah, holes in the Rosh Hashanah. And just like if there's a hole in one of the walls or in any of the walls of Rosh Hashanah, that hole is considered a Rosh Hashanah. The rest of the house is considered relative to that area as a chayri Rosh Hashanah. And the Gemara now supports this, that chayri Rosh Hashanah is a Rosh Hashanah by presenting a teaching. The Idmar, for we learned chayri Rosh Hashanah k'Rosh Hashanah damu, holes in the Rosh Hashanah are like a Rosh Hashanah. And the part of this teaching also speaks about chayri Rosh Hashanah, so we include that as well. Chayri Rosh Hashanah, holes in Rosh Hashanah is a machlekes. Abaya says k'Rosh Hashanah damu, they are like a Rosh Hashanah. So just like the holes in Rosh Hashanah are Rosh Hashanah, Abaya says the holes in Rosh Hashanah are also Rosh Hashanah, and Rava says lafka Rosh Hashanah damu. They're not like a Rosh Hashanah. Rather, they're looked at as a Rosh unto themselves. And if they are 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim wide or larger, they have the dimensions of a carmelis, and they are a carmelis. And if they are less than 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim wide, they have the dimensions of a mokem torah, and they're a mokem torah. So really here is the core of the discussion that's related to the teaching of Rav Gidl. That Rav Gidl said that a person cannot carry in this house. So Abaya said about this that if a person were to carve out an area that's 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim wide, and complete the height in that area to 10 tefachim, he cannot carry in the whole house. And the reason is because the rest of the house is a chayri Rosh Hashanah, which are Rosh Hashanah. And in that regard, we brought a supportive teaching where it says over there that the holes of Rosh Hashanah are like a Rosh Hashanah. And over there it also spoke about the holes in Rosh Hashanah, where there it's a machlekes. Abaya says they are Rosh Hashanah, and Rava says they're not. And as a result of presenting the second part of the teaching about a chayri Rosh Hashanah, that there's a machlekes, the Gemara now goes into a side discussion which consists of 2 questions that Rava asked on Abaya and Abaya responded to. So we're now going to have 2 questions that Rava asked on Abaya's opinion that the holes of Rosh Hashanah are also considered a Rosh Hashanah. So let's see that inside. Omar le Rava Abaya, Rava said to Abaya, according to you, the Amris that says, that you say, the holes of Rosh Hashanah are like a Rosh Hashanah. Maishno, what's it different maha from this? When Rav Dimi came, he said in the name of Rabbi Yechanan, we only need it for a corner that's near Rosh Hashanah. Previously in the Gemara, we asked on the Mishnah that says, but an ocean, a an area of fields, the bench area in the market, and a carmelis, all these are a carmelis. We said, what does it mean, and a carmelis? They're all a carmelis. So we brought a teaching from Rabbi Yechanan that that this case is referring to a Karen Zavas Asmuchel Rishus Harabim, which that is, like we explained, that there was a Rishus Harabim here, and there were houses lined up near the Rishus Harabim, and one house was removed from the Rishus Harabim, creating an area, an open area. That's what a Carmelis is referring to. It's another case of a Carmelis. So Rava here is asking Abaya, what's the hole in the Rishus Harabim any different from there? His question is, let it be like the holes in the Rishus Harabim. Just like a hole in the Rishus Harabim is a Carmelis, this area is also like a hole in the Rishus Harabim. It should also be, just like the hole in the Rishus Harabim is a Rishus Harabim, this area should also be a Rishus Harabim. So why is it a Carmelis? And the Baya answered, Hasam over there, its use is not convenient. Hoch over here by the holes, its use is convenient. So Baya answered to Rava that the holes in the Rishus Harabim are only considered a Rishus Harabim if it's convenient for the public to use it. So a regular hole in the wall the public could use conveniently. However, this area, being that it's removed from the Rishus Harabim and the flow of traffic is here, and there are houses blocking off that area, so since its use is not convenient, therefore it's not considered like a hole in the Rishus Harabim, and to receive the status of Rishus Harabim, rather it's going to be a Carmelis, it's because it's set off from the Rishus Harabim. So that's the first question that Rava asked Abaya, and the answer of Abaya. The Gemara now presents a second question, and this second question first starts off with background information, so it's in purple because it's going to lead into the question. Tonight we learned in the Mishnah, Hazerik Dalan Amas Bekesel, one that throws 4 Amas at a wall, and we learned this already in the previous Gemara, this case. The din is Lamaila Miyud, if he threw it higher than 10 Tvachim, Kazerik Ba'avir, it's like he threw it in the air, he's not Chayiv. Lamata Miyud, lower than 10 Tvachim, Kazerik Bar, it's like he threw it on the ground, and just like if it landed on the ground in front of the wall, he would be Chayiv for throwing 4 Amas from Rishus Harabim, because it's a case that it's exactly 4 Amas from the wall. So too, when he threw it at the wall, he's also going to be Chayiv. We asked on this teaching in the Mishnah, what do you mean? It's like he threw it on the ground, but it didn't land. And like Rashi explains, if it hit the wall, it certainly bounced back. It didn't land outside of 4 Amas. It landed within 4 Amas. So why is he chayiv? If it landed on the ground by the wall, there's a distance of 4 Amas. However, here it bounced back. It didn't land outside of 4 Amas. Rabbi Yechanan said in response to this question, it's taught by a fatty fig. It's talking about that the person threw a fig at the wall and it stuck to the wall, so it did go a distance of 4 Amas. So this is all what's explained over there in that Mishnah. So it says Rava that this discussion and the answer of Rabbi Yechanan seems to contradict and challenge Abaya's opinion, and he explains as follows: V'i salka daitach. And if it enters your mind that chayru Rishus Harabim, Rishus Harabim damu, that holes in a Rishus Harabim are like a Rishus Harabim, lamali leukma bedvei l'shmeina. Why do I need to establish it with a fatty fig? Why do we need to say the case is he threw a fatty fig, which is very rare and uncommon? Lukma b'tzrer fits. Let him establish it with a rock or other item. V'denach b'char, and there was a hole in the wall, and it landed in the hole. So according to Abaya, that Chay Rishus Harabim is like a Rishus Harabim, the answer should have been not that he threw a fatty fig, which is not a regular thing to do, but rather that there was a hole in the wall and it landed in the hole. Because according to Abaya, it's a Rishus Harabim and he'd be chayav. So Rava uses this to show that from here we can see that it's not a Rishus Harabim, and that's why we didn't give that explanation. We needed to speak about a fatty fig. So the Gemara says that Abaya would answer Rava. Sometimes he would answer in one way, and sometimes he would answer him a different way. So we're going to have 2 answers here. Zimnin, sometimes, at times, Mishanallah, he answered it that shiny tzrer v'cheitzvitz, a rock or another item is different. The meheder v'hasi, because it returns and comes back. If a person's going to throw it in the hole, it's very unlikely to stay in the hole. It's more likely that just like if there was no hole, it's going to bounce back. Even with a hole, it's going to bounce out and come back. And therefore it comes out, says Abaya, the reason we didn't speak about a hole, even though he would also be chayiv, we prefer to speak about a dvei l'shmeina, a fatty fig, because it's much more likely that the person will throw a fig and it'll stick to the wall than that he'll throw a rock and it'll stay in the hole. And therefore it's preferable to talk about a fatty fig, which is rare and uncommon, than to talk about something which is even more rare and uncommon, and that is that it should remain in the hole. And Zimnin, sometimes Mishanali would answer it because of the less bechar. It's talking about a wall that doesn't have holes, like we'll explain in a moment. So these are the 2 answers of Abaya to Rava, that why didn't we speak about a hole, even though if it was a hole, according to Abaya, he would be chayiv, is because either it's very uncommon to stay in the hole, and therefore it's not a good answer to give. The second one is that this is not a wall that has a hole in it. It's clearly not talking about that there was a hole over there. Now the Gemara is going to support this and prove that it's a wall that doesn't have a hole in it. Mimai, where do we know this? So he's supporting it. He's asking the question in the context of giving the answer. From where do we know this? Midaktani Reisha, from this that it says in the Reisha, Zarek Lamarla Miyud, if he threw it higher than 10 Tvachim, Kazerik Ba'aver, it's like throwing in the ear and he's putter. And if it enters your mind that it's by a wall that has a hole in it, so you're telling me it landed in a hole in the Seifa, and that's why it's chayav. That means the Reisha is also talking about that it landed in a hole. They have to be the same type of case. Just there it's above 10 Tvachim, and in the Seifa it's lower than 10 Tvachim. So if it's talking about that it's a wall that has a hole, and it landed in a hole, why is it like throwing in the ear? But it landed in the hole, and the hole is above 10 Tvachim, and it's going to be a Rishus HaYachid. And the Gemara will show this in a minute why it's a Rishus HaYachid. So if the hole has an area of 4 by 4 Tvachim, it's for sure Rishus HaYachid. It has the dimensions of a Rishus HaYachid. It's 4 Tvachim by 4 Tvachim wide, and it's higher than 10 Tvachim. But even if it doesn't have 4 Tvachim by 4 Tvachim wide, it'll still be a Rishus HaYachid. And that's what the Gemara is going to conclude by further supporting what we just said, which is that he should be chayiv. V'chi teiman, if you're going to respond to me, if you're going to say, Masnisin the lesbu dalad al dalad, our mission is that it doesn't have in it the area of 4 by 4, therefore the Sefer is chayiv, because the holes of a Rishus HaRabim are like a Rishus HaRabim, and in the Reishi is potter, because it doesn't have the dimensions of a Rishus HaYachid, so he didn't throw from Rishus HaRabim to Rishus HaYachid. Says the Gemara, that's not going to work, because it will be a Rishus HaYachid. V'amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Rabbi Chia. Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Rabbi Chia, Zarek l'maylim yud tvachim, if somebody threw an item higher than 10 tvachim, v'holcha v'nocha b'chor, and it went and it landed, it rested in a hole, kolshu, which is very small. Banu l'machlekes Rab Meir v'Rabbanan. We come to an argument between Rab Meir and the Rabbanan. The Rab Meir savar, Rab Meir holds choykikin lahashlim. We carve it out to complete it. Rab Meir holds elsewhere, and it's brought down in the flowcharts here, that we basically will say that we're going to, if we have space to carve out an area 4 by 4, that's what we will do. And therefore, it's going to be considered that it landed in a Rishus HaYachid, he'll be chayiv. The Rabbanan say we do not carve it out to complete the dimensions. So Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Rabbi Chia that in this very case of throwing above 10 tefachim in a very small hole, it's a machlekes. Rabbi Meir is going to say he's chayiv, because we say chaykikin lahashlam and it'll become a Rishus HaYachid. And the Rabbanan say pater because we don't say chaykikin lahashlam and it's not a Rishus HaYachid. And this Mishnah that speaks about Zarak, the whole Mishnah that we presented, is a Stam Mishnah, and Stam Mishnah is Reb Meir. So we're proving over here that the wall did not have a hole, because if it had a hole, then he wouldn't only be chayiv when he threw it lower than 10 tefachim, but also when he threw it higher than 10 tefachim. Because when it landed in the hole higher than 10 tefachim, if it had the dimensions of a Rishus HaYachid, it's certainly a Rishus HaYachid. And even if it doesn't, it'll still be a Rishus HaYachid, because this is a Stam Mishnah, which is the opinion of Reb Meir, and Reb Meir holds that even when it doesn't have the dimensions of a Rishus HaYachid, we carve it out to see it as if it does have the dimensions. So here we have the response of Abaye to Rava, that the wall clearly doesn't have a hole, and that's why we spoke about it, Dveila Shmina. So just to summarize this piece, let's just conclude with here. Do we not hear from here that it's talking about a wall that doesn't have a hole in it? It says the Gemara Shmami, no, we do hear it from here. So to summarize, what we presented over here is the teaching of Rav Gidl. The main part of our Gemara was what Abaye said, which is that if a person would carve out an area that's 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim wide and complete the height in that place to 10 tefachim, he's allowed to carry in the whole house. And the explanation is because the rest of the house relative to that area is chayr Rishus HaYachid or achar Rishus HaYachid. And in that, regarding that, we brought down a teaching to support it. And we said the Itmar, we learned that chayr Rishus HaYachid are like a Rishus HaYachid. And part of that teaching as well spoke about chayr Rishus HaRabim, holes in a Rishus HaRabim. Whether it's machlekas, Abaye says they're Rishus HaRabim, and Rava says they're not. And since we presented that teaching with that machlekas, the Gemara went to a side discussion, which consisted of 2 questions that Rava asked Abaye on his opinion that the holes of Rishus HaRabim are Rishus HaRabim, and Abaye answered both of them. Now we're going to move on to the next part of the Gemara, which is the teaching of Rav Chisda that was presented in the previous Gemara. Gufa, the teaching itself. Amar Rav Chisda said, no, it's kana b'Rishus HaYachid. If one stuck a pole in a Rishus HaYachid, v'zarg v'nach al gabav, and one threw an item and it landed on it, afilu gavaya mea amma, even if it's 100 amas high, Chayiv, the person is chayiv in place Rishus HaYachid Eila Adla Rikiya, because Rishus HaYachid goes up to the sky. So the point of Rav Chisda over here is to bring out that Rishus HaYachid goes all the way up to the sky. But there's another thing we see from Rav Chisda, and that is that the hanacha in the Rishus HaYachid doesn't have to be in an area that's 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim wide. Although generally we say it does, Rav Chisda holds that in Rishus HaYachid it doesn't have to be. And the way we see that over here is because a pole, doesn't have the area of 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim wide. So the Gemara now is going to discuss couldn't we say that Rav Chisda fits with all opinions, or are we going to be forced to say that it only fits with Rebbe and not the Rabbanon? So the Gemara says, Lema, let us say, and it's in a green, because we're trying to make a conclusion and assert an understanding from this. Lema, let us say, Rav Chisda the Amar Rebbe, that Rav Chisda said like Rebbe, he only fits with Rebbe and not the Rabbanon. The Tanya, because we learned in a Brisa, Zarek v'nochal gaba is this kolshu. If somebody threw an item from Rosh Hashanah, and now we're understanding it that he threw it into the Rosh Hashanah and it landed on a very small protrusion, a very small area. And we'll just point out over here that we brought down this teaching previously in the Gemara, and over there we understood it differently. Both according to Rashi, it'll come out different the way we understood it there and the way we understood it here. We're not going to explain why it's different. We're just going to focus on how it's presented here. He threw an item from the Rosh Hashanah to the Rosh Hashanah, and it landed on a ziz kolshu, a small protrusion. Rebbe mechayev, Rebbe makes the person chayev. V'chachamim peitrim, and Chacham say he's potter. So it seems that Rebbe says we don't need an area of 4x4 for the Hanach and Rosh Hashanah, and the Chachamim say that we do. The Gemara responds, Omar Abaya challenges and disputes this conclusion. He says that it's not the case. We could say that Rav Chisda actually fits with all opinions. Amar Abaya Rosh Hashanah the Kula Amalei Pligi. And Rosh Hashanah, everybody agrees. Nobody argues. Kid Rav Chisda, they agree with Rav Chisda that we don't need an area of 4x4 for the Hanacha. So what's going on over here? It seems that the Rabbanan say we do. Elahacha, rather over here, be Elon Ha'emid Rosh Hashanah. It's talking about a tree. It's by a tree that's standing in the Rosh Hashanah. V'neifing noitel Rosh Hashanah, and its branch extends to the Rosh Hashanah. V'zarag v'nocha, and the person threw the item and it landed on the branch. And the machlekes is as follows. So if it would land in the Rosh Hashanah, everybody would agree it's chayiv, even if it's a very small area, because we don't need a hanacha on an area that's 4x4. However, in this case, there's a machlekes. Machlekes is based on the following. The Rebbe suffer that Rebbe holds Amrinan Shadi Neifei Basari Kari. We say cast the branch after the trunk. We say just like the trunk is in Rosh Hashanah, we view the branch as also being in Rosh Hashanah, and therefore it doesn't need to have an area that's 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim wide. The Rabbanan Savri and the Rabbanan hold Lo Amrinan Shadi Neifei Basari Kari. We do not say cast the branch after the tree. The trunk of the tree, and the tree is in Rosh Hashanah, the branch is in Rosh Hashanah, and therefore, since it came to rest on the branch, which is in Rosh Hashanah, it does need an area of 4x4, and it doesn't have it. And that's why the Rabbanan argue only because they view it as being in Rosh Hashanah. However, if it were to be in the Rosh Hashanah, they would agree it doesn't need an area that's 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim wide. So here it's a very small piece of Gemara. We simply looked at whether we can say that Rav Chisda will fit with all opinions, or we forced to say that he only fits with Rebbe and not the Rabbanan. And the Gemara initially said it seems like he only fits with Rebbe and not the Rabbanan, and we concluded that we could explain that machlekes in such a way that it's not talking about a case that reflects on Rav Chisda. Everybody will agree with Rav Chisda. They're arguing about something else entirely different, whether Aminan Shadi Nefei Basari Kare or Loy Aminan Shadi Nefei Basari Kare.